Nana.
Hi, how are you? I have this really adorable little baby quilt here that was just given to me to do, and it's 51 by 61 inches. So this is what the top looks like. Really, really cute.
Very nice.
And then this is the backing. I just sewed that together. So I'm getting ready to find the center of the top and the bottom of the backing so that I can get it loaded up on the machine. This is our machine here, which is affectionately called Dottie, which is named after my mom, Steffi's grandma. And this is the one that makes us all kinds of cool designs and neat stuff. My little hobby on the side, which is slowly turning into a retirement business, I hope someday. So,
And tell everybody where you're located.
we are in Ohio, Uniontown, a little a community called Green, and do orders from all over. Right now, I just got an order for somebody out in San Diego, a former friend of one of my sons who is a big Green Bay Packer fan, and he wants a t-shirt quilt done. So I just sent him a quote, and he's going to be sending me his 25, 30 t-shirts to do up a Green Bay Packer memory quilt for him. So
Nice.
but this is our little Dottie here, and she was named after my mom because my mom is kind of the starter of all of this, and that she's not so much a sewer, but she's a knitter, and she's very crafty. And as a young girl, my mom tried to teach me how to knit, and I was kind of interested, but not super interested. And she had me join 4-H, and when I joined 4-H, I joined in a sewing class, and that kind of became my passion because as a little girl I used to like sew, get material, and I would sew Barbie doll clothes, my cousin and I. And so my mom knew, she recognized that I had a talent for it, so she signed me up for it. And she had an old Singer sewing machine, and it had the knee pedal on the side that you used. So I started out using that to begin with. Made in 4-H a pin cushion and an apron. Those were the first two things that I made. And then I was 13 years old when my mom and dad decided that they were gonna get me a sewing machine for Christmas. And back then, if you got a sewing machine, that's all that you got for Christmas. So 50 years later, my beautiful Kenmore that I still to this day use every time I want a quick heavy duty machine. I love that machine. It's basic. It only has a few bells and buttons, nothing too dramatic, but it's for my heavy duty sewing, and I'll just go ahead and do all my regular sewing on that. So she kind of got me started on the sewing track once she recognized that I was interested in sewing. And from there I graduated to making clothes for myself and my little sister, who is 9 years younger. And then clothing really wasn't my big interest. I really enjoyed like putting things together, and I kind of started self-taught myself to do some quilts. And from that point on, it's kind of all history. So right now what I'm doing is I'm pinning the backing for this baby quilt onto the top lead, and you find the center of the fabric and the center of the lead so that it's on Dottie here, and I'm pinning it one way, and then from the center I'll pin the opposite way, and you'll see why in a little bit. And I'm going to do the same thing on the bottom lead to show how the backing goes on. And the quilting part of it was a passion of mine, and I also have a Janome sewing machine, a portable machine, which I love. My daughter and my husband decided that I needed a portable machine, which I'm ever so thankful for, because when we do our quilting retreats and things like that, it is really a lot easier to just throw it in a bag and take it with me with all my projects. And we've done a couple of quilting weekends and just the girls and some wine and a good time.
It's fun.
Good time.
You need to do that a few times a year.
I know. Right now it's usually just like right the beginning of November. And I'm hoping that we can do like maybe one day would be really fun. It's like a dream of mine to go on one of those quilting cruises. That would be so much fun.
Yes.
So I do the quilting on the side. I have a regular full-time job. And I do this as a side business. Have some friends that do quilting, and so I'm lucky that they go ahead and give me business. And then I've been slowly building up a clientele so that when I do fully retire, that I hopefully will have enough business to keep me out of trouble and earn a few extra dollars here and there.
That's a good plan.
Yeah. Today we're gonna do this baby quilt for a friend of ours. Her name is Shannon. And we're using the wrought iron pattern, which is a paper pattern that you can see. Pretty simple. We're going to use ecru colored thread. There's a lot of different threads out there to use, but the one that I really like is the King Tut. And the reason I like King Tut is because it is a 100% cotton. And that's what it looks like. And it's a little bit thicker than some of the polyesters. So when the quilting pattern is done, you actually can see the quilting pattern. And some of the others are a little bit thinner and don't show up quite as nice. And I found this to be really strong. And when I'm doing t-shirt quilts, and that the weight of those quilts are very heavy, and I think it just stands up better. It's a little bit more expensive, but I think it's well worth it when doing it. That, you know, somebody's put a lot of time and effort into making a quilt for somebody that they care about or they love, that you want it not to fall apart. You want it to stay together and keep nice for years and years to come. Plus you want to be able to throw it in the washer and dryer, because as this baby quilt here will probably attest, it's going to get spit on, pooped on, peed on, you know, all that stuff. So you need to be able to throw it in the washing machine and dryer. Okay, so we have the top lead done. And I'm going to roll this up a little bit. Excuse me. Now Dottie here will open up to 12 feet, but because my space is pretty limited, we only have her opened up for 9 feet. I have a couple of king size quilts that I personally have done, but I haven't had Dottie opened up that big yet, so I haven't done them. So my average size quilt, the biggest that we can do is 82 inches. So now on the bottom lead, I have marked here where the center is on the lead, and then I have the center of the fabric, which I already found. So again, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to pin this in place, going right to left on this side, because as you roll it up, you have to smooth it. You don't want to be stabbing yourself and getting blood on the fabric. And believe me, I've done that a few times. The back is on the lead right here. It's on this side here, and it's faced. The right side is face out, because that's going to be the back side of your quilt. Okay. And now what we're going to do is we're going to roll and try to keep it as even as possible. And I was telling you we were doing the pins, and we go this way with the pins, because as I'm turning it, I'm smoothing it out like this, trying to keep the wrinkles out, keep it as even as possible. And when I'm going this way, obviously I want the pins going the same way that my hands are going so that I'm not gonna stick myself. So what you do is you just roll this up onto the sleeve like that. This helps. I mean, you don't have to do this extra step, but I find for me that it helps a lot because I never, and I knock on wood when I say this, have had a fold or a pleat when I've been quilting because I've taken that little bit of extra time just to smooth it out, flatten it, make sure there's no extra material in there to cause a pleat when I'm quilting, because the last thing you want to have to do is to go back after you've already done most of your quilt and then have to rip it back out again because you didn't see that there was a fold or a crease there. So by taking a little extra time on this end, it saves me a lot of time on the completion end of it. Okay? Mm-hmm. So this is the back side here. And as I stated, the right side of the fabric is down. And then what we do is we take the top of the quilt. Now when I cut the fabric out, I usually make it about 3 inches wider than the quilt top because you have to have something to stretch and grab your grippers to. And we're going to do the very same thing. We're going to find the center of the top of the quilt because we're going to do the same process for top and bottom. So I find the bottom first. Okay, so there's the center right there, just pinning it. And this lead here, again, has a point of center, which shows me right there. So I know that I've got to line this needle or pin up to that, and I'm going to do the very same thing that I did on the backing for this, starting with the bottom first, because when I get ready up to the top, I get it wound up there, then we put the batting in, and then we have to machine baste it, and you'll see how that's done. So we'll start, and we'll do the very same thing here, just by pinning it. Okay, we got the bottom part centered, and we're going to do the very same thing. And again, try to keep it as smooth as possible. This quilt is so cute. Is that, does she know what the baby's going to be?
No, baby? I think they're waiting.
Oh, okay. So it's a gender neutral?
Yeah, gender neutral.
Oh, she's got all kinds of cool colors in here. This is all centered up. And then this pin here will be the center of the head lead here. But before I pin that on there, I need to measure out my batting so that I can stuff the batting inside in between it to make that sandwich. And then we'll baste around it, and then we'll be able to start the quilting process. I had doing an Ohio State quilt, and I had all of the reds and grays and blacks, and so I want to make sure I don't have any of those threads stuck in here because they will definitely show through on this baby quilt, which is so soft and pastel colored. And I think we're pretty good. Gone ahead, because this has a lot of white background to it, we're going to use a white batting instead of a cream color batting. I've cut it out to the width and the length that I need, and again, I've gone a few inches over the sides just to give me a little playroom. And what I'm going to do is I am going to squish it underneath, in between the top and the back, and then we'll pin it into place. And then we will match up the centers like we did below. And I'm just going to pin these in place because we're going to go around stitching it, but I just need to hold it in place while we do that. So about every 5 or 6 inches, I just put a pin in, hold it in place. I will say Dottie is very temperamental with her tension. You got to make sure when you're doing the machine, whatever fabric you're using, to check your tension on it, because if you're doing t-shirt quilts, obviously the tension's going to need to be a little bit different than what it is for doing a cotton quilt like this. And this here, I just got done doing another quilt that's the same fabric consistency and the same batting, so the tension should not be a problem. So she's pretty easy to thread up, and she's easy to use, but sometimes she is temperamental. So we're going to use an ecru colored thread. All right, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to make sure that it's pulled nice and taut, and we have these elastic, I'm not quite sure what you'd call them, but they're like braces, and you just snap it onto that, push it down, and it helps to keep the fabric taut. So again, that you have a proper amount of tension, and you do that on either side. Alrighty. All right, what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to start up at the top here on this side, and I'm going to do a basting stitch all the way across, and that will hold the quilt in place at the very top. And then I'm going to go down either side. So this section here is going to match up with the pattern, which I'll show you in a second as we're going through. This amount of, this section here will actually be where the pattern's going to go. So by basting it in place, the fabric's not going to shift around or move. So we're going to go ahead and do the basting across the top first. It's a pretty simple process. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to lay the pattern out to match where the quilt lays on the board here. So what I do is I take the edge of the quilt and I line it up to wherever the edge of the pattern's going to be to make this design on that side of the fabric. So it's pretty easy. I really like these patterns. They are pretty simple to use. All you're going to do is you're using this little red laser light, and you follow this little red laser light pattern around on the line, and it'll sew the design on the opposite side. So I just line up the pattern to the width of the quilt, and once you start, you go from right to left, and you just continue on. And I'm going to guess this to maybe take, with the design, maybe 2 bobbins of thread, if that, because it's not a huge quilt, and the design is fairly simple. So what I'm going to do on this side here is locate the edge of the quilt, and we have the pattern over here, so I have to determine where this pattern is going to show up on that side. So the lowest point I want to be approximately there. So I'm going to put the red light to that spot that I want the lowest part of the pattern to be, so that it doesn't go any further than that, because the binding is going to come over and that's going to use up some of that fabric. So I want the edge of the pattern to roughly be in that general vicinity. The next thing to do is take the design of the pattern, find your starting point, needle down, up, pull to get that back thread. And then I usually, just because of my habits, do a couple of back stitches to lock it. And then you start. Try to keep a consistent speed as possible, especially when you have curves involved. That way they're less jumpy.
So you finish one pass.
Yeah, finished one pass, and I'm just looking to make sure all the stitches look pretty good on this side, which they do. And this one here, I have it at 7 stitches per inch, so it's a little bit bigger pattern, bigger stitch pattern, and I think it just shows it off a little bit nicer. So I'm going to cut the top and bottom threads, and then what we do is we go back, and then we start the next line across. Okay, so now we're at the bottom of the quilt, and we're going to do the same thing where we're going to pin it in place so that I can go along and baste it like we did on the top and hold it all in place. And we'll only have to do a couple more passes and then it'll be complete. But again, just the basting part of it holds it all in place. That way it's not getting wrinkled up, and it'll make a nice smooth even edge. So it's taken, this will be, I believe, like the 5th pass, so about 5 of those patterns down, and they run about, I think, about 12 inches, 12 to 14 inches the pattern runs. So that would go ahead and take it. This is such a cute quilt. I love this. Completed. Awesome. All right, well, luckily this time the pattern came right to the very edge. Usually I don't get that lucky, but this time I did, and it came, you can see the pattern comes down and up, and finished out really nicely. So now the quilting part is all done, and I go back and just look at the reverse side of it to make sure there's not really any defects, that the tension looks good. And make sure that nothing got caught up or is looking bad. And once I do that, then I can go ahead and cut it off dotty, and then we have an end product, and you can see how it all looks. So I'm just gonna look at this, look at the back side of it, make sure we don't have any folds, make sure the tension is pretty even. It's kind of hard to see the pattern on the back here because it's white on white, but looks good. We're gonna trusty batting scissors here. We do not use these for fabric. We just use these for batting because they get dulled really easily. And we go along. We have a baby quilt.
Thanks, Nana.
Sure. And now all that's left to do is to go ahead and put some binding on it. And we're going to use the backing color as the binding around the outside edge, so that'll look really, really cute. Kind of tie the whole thing together. Quilt, yeah. So it's a lot of fun. I enjoy it, and anybody that's interested in having a quilt done, just send me a quote, and I'll be happy to go ahead and send me your phone number, your information, and I'll be happy to provide you with a quote.
Where can we find you?
You can find me on Quilt Swag, www.quiltswag.com.